and I saw that there might have been better ways to do it, where you're not necessarily using AI to lie to a girl,
right?
And you're not compromising yourself and changing who you are to get a girl,
right?
Where it was like, because first of all, I'll tell you that if that's what you're like, the reason why I didn't resonate is because I was like, that's not gonna get the girl, and it didn't get the girl in the story. And so it's like, if you're telling me that basically the way that I take away this from the story is that cheating will put you in a situation where you don't get what you want. And that's where I'm like, if you're not aligned with your actual values, then you risk being misinterpreted in a way where you can't defend yourself.
Yes.
And so that's a big thing with branding that I think. Man, I've been thinking like
yeah, man, what have you been thinking
about just continuously how to raise the bar. Ooh. And I believe that the bar is really just the standard that you hold yourself to or your group to in a given context.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been thinking about, is just how to raise the bar. And I think it starts with details. So and I think the tricky thing is it's always easy to keep those standards in a space that you're familiar with, because over time you just learn what the standard is or where the bar is for the people that you're working with. You always hear people that go professional. Yeah. I think in sports more so, but I think it also applies to the arts. I think it applies to even tech, where you think that this is how hard you should be working. And hard is a relative word, right? Yeah. But you find out that it's a relative word. And you're like, oh no, that person's working way harder. Like Kenny Smith, the basketball commentator, former basketball player, NBA champion, etc. He was talking about how he was like in high school, he was like, I want to make it to the NBA. And his coach was like, oh, you got to work way harder than you're working right now. And it was just like, I guess like the way that his coach said it just framed it in the situation where it was like, I mean, if you want it, you can do it. Yeah, but you're not putting in that input that's going to yield those outputs. And same with Michael Jordan. He talked about when he doesn't tell this story, but his coach at North Carolina talks about it, where he was like, I want to be the best. And he was like, well, you have to work harder. And he's like, I work just as hard as everybody else. And he was like, well, if you want to be the best, you have to work way harder than everybody else. And I think that's an important thing to highlight, because he goes on to say, and since then, every year, it was like he just kept getting 10 times better. The improvement was better. And I don't think you can look at an absolute measure relative to everybody else. Yeah. Because I think the world's people tend towards improvement. Okay. We evolve. We tend towards getting better. That's why, I mean, like, we talk about this often. Like, people in the past, people in the future and current day today should measurably be better than the people in the past. Just because they came after. They have the people in the past as a reference point. Yeah, yeah. That experience. A reference, yeah. And so if you're not better, then something is amiss. Interesting. So I think like there's just, I mean, tying it back to the initial thing, it's just like raising the bar, raising the standards in a given context. And I think a big thing about getting better in a different space is holding yourself in a new space to like that high standard.
Interesting. Yeah. I just saw this post by Reid Hoffman, who was talking about how much effort it does take to build a successful startup in any space. And he had a similar sentiment, but the way that I read it, I always am a little bit skeptical, because we talk about these things quite a bit. Yeah. I mean, he was saying that you should eat, sleep, drink, code, product, like you shouldn't really have a life. Okay. Like, honestly. Yeah. And he was like, you really shouldn't. Like, there's no point in having a life. Like, you're building the company to get to the point where then you can enjoy life. But you shouldn't be having leisure activities while you're building a startup.
Yeah.
He's like, you should just be all in. Every single waking hour of the day, you should be trying to build something that you're proud of.
Yeah.
I understand that. It makes sense, but I always see it like I'm always a little skeptical because, like, do people actually work every single waking hour coding? Is that really how he's saying? Like people who are, let's say, are technical should be spending their time in the business? Like, it feels a little off, but I do hear that story over and over and over again. So I mean, there's probably some.
Marissa Myers was like, I work 100 and some ridiculous number of hours a week. I think it was like 150 hours a week. One of the early first Google employees, and then she was eventually the CEO of Yahoo. And I think it's a testament to that Reid Hoffman sentiment. But how do you feel about it?
It's tough because I think there's always more you could be doing. There's never, I can't imagine, and I've done this, right, where I've coded for as long as I can before I just get tired, go back to bed, and then wake up and do the exact same thing. It's like, but there's always more you could be doing. There's always more. You're never exhausting every single option where you can be the most efficient.
Yeah.
So to me, you have to pick and choose when you're going to put the work in and be diligent about holding yourself to the high standards when you're doing the work, but then not shutting your brain off in those after hours.
Yeah.
I think the distinction between the startup world and like the 9 to 5 is that with the 9 to 5 you can leave the job there.
Okay.
And you physically cannot do that with us. If you start doing that with a startup, you'll fail very quickly.
Exactly.
And so I think there's that too, where it's like your time management just becomes completely encompassed by the startup, which I think is the correct choice. But to say that you should have no leisure activity is also like a little bit of an extreme, where I'm like, I can guarantee you he probably went out to dinner while he was building LinkedIn. Right. Or he went on a date with, or whatever it was, went to Six Flags or something, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like you can't have no fun, but it really can't be any more than, 5% of your time, right? It can't be a majority of your time.
I think looking at it on a linear perspective is limiting. And I also think that when I hear that, the thing that comes to mind is, well, what does work look like to you? What does that 100% investment look like to you? Because some people that means sitting in front of a laptop for 18 hours out of the day, sleeping for 4, and then eating for like the other hour and a half. For other people, that means sitting in front of, or sitting and thinking for 20 hours, or not 20 hours, just 3 hours out of the day, just blocking out time for thinking and going through the mental reps.
Yep.
Then it means sitting down and coding for a little bit, exactly what you just put in your head. And then it means going and eating and talking to somebody over dinner. And then it might mean going out, and this is stepping away from tech, it might mean going out and networking and talking to people and saying, well, what do you think about this idea? What do you think about this idea? And so people count their hours differently.
Exactly.
A lawyer will charge you for thinking about your case while he's taking a piss.
Yeah.
And so again, I think when it's a way of life, then you should be, especially with startup stuff, you should be relating different aspects of your life to the thing.
Yes.
But I don't think that it's something where you have to be physically active the whole time. I'll give you another example. I think, and again, I'm just rooted in sports, but I think sports is a really good reference because you physically can't do that activity, that athletic activity, over and over again, or you're going to burn out.
Or break something.
And so you can't do it. And so you have to rest and recover, and people optimize that differently. But you have to rest and recover. And then there's other ways where you can study film. You can sometimes playing another sport leisurely will inform your game. Like Steph Curry is a big golfer. And he golfs in different tournaments in the off season, etc. And he's one of the best people in history to play this game.
Right.
And I think a big part of that is because seems like the type of brain that understands that you can learn something from another, by doing one activity informs another activity.
I think it's a really good analogy, honestly. It just kind of going to like double clicking on what you said there around like people count their hours differently. to me, you have to be productive in a way that actually produces like an output. Even if you're just thinking about something, to me, that's not necessarily productive work until you get to the spot where you are deploying something, or you are creating something, or you're doing something with that thought. Because I think a lot of people will sit on their hands for a lot of hours in a day and say, "Oh yeah, I'm thinking about this problem. I'm pontificating about this." It's like, okay, that maybe works for like an hour at most, but you're going to learn way more if you just get your hands dirty and start doing it and learn that way, rather than thinking, "Oh, I'm just going to sit back and think about this, and this counts as my work." It's like, to me, there's a little bit of a disconnect there, because it's so easy to fall into the, "Oh, I'll just think about this more."
Yeah, there's like to me, it's very much the oscillation between two. Like, you have to have
Yeah,
a
you
measure
have to
of
have both.
production, and then you have to have a measure of thinking. You know, Warren Buffett schedules time for him thinking. He was like, if you don't, then you literally won't think. You'll just get caught up in the rat race, and you won't have time to sit back and take in information, digest it, and then apply it and analyze it and make a better decision. So, to your point, I think that it's the other extreme of what Reid Hoffman is saying. And I think ultimately what he ends up thinking, especially because he's an investor, is, I'm going to put my chips behind somebody who defaults to over execution or maybe over effort, because one, he can see it, so it's probably makes him feel a little bit better.
Okay.
But then two, it's better because you're actually getting something tangible, as opposed to somebody who might be cloaking their mental reps as like, I'm thinking about it. You get that a lot with artists, where they get in that space and then it turns into writer's block or whatever that might be. But I think that again, it goes to that whole thing. It's like, how are you thinking? Like, are you visualizing, or are you just occupying your mind, hoping that you get an idea to come to you like a lightning bolt? Because I think that's very different.
So that's interesting that you say that, because when you said that Warren schedules time for thinking, that was the exact reaction I had in my brain internally. Was like, most of the ideas that I have aren't done from a scheduled time for me to say, "Oh yeah, let me be a genius now."
Yeah.
You know, it's done through like sitting and like the osmosis of like, "Hey, I'm just ruminating on this." Like a really good example I have, like especially with tech, would be like, I'll be working on code, I'll get into like a good bug, you know, where I'm like, "Oh, this is pretty complex. Like, how did this happen?" And then you start thinking about that in the shower, when I'm out at dinner. You know what I mean?
It's
so
just like it's working.
Yes, I'm obsessing over it.
Yeah.
I don't have and I haven't tried it, so maybe I should block some time out for this, but I haven't tried sitting down and going like, "Okay, brain, time to think." Like, to me, that's a weird spot, because to me, the thinking isn't done in a structured way, or I guess the ideas that you're going to have from all these learnings don't happen, to me at least, in a very structured way where I can sit down and say, "Okay, serve me up the idea." I
don't sit down like Warren does and schedule time for thinking like that. I do schedule time for meditating,
like reflection.
Yeah, reflection. But even meditating, the time block I can use for different modes. So, to give an example, one of it, like, I might schedule time to meditate, and when I'm doing that, it's almost like garbage collecting.
Oh, okay. What do you mean by that?
Like, for the brain, because it's like we have all these thoughts that get dumped into us from the content that we're consuming, or they might be ruminating for a time in the past, or it just might be something that, you know, like, we've just been obsessing over. And I think literally taking the time sometimes to be like, okay, I'm just gonna let them pass through and not try to cling. And then whenever I feel like I'm not really thinking about anything, it's almost like it's going with the flow. So sometimes it's like, okay, I don't have to hold on to a thought and figure something out for these 5 minutes or for these 10 minutes. And what that does, I find, is when I get back to what I'm doing, I have more space freed up to apply my brain power to whatever I'm trying to figure out at the time. And then I also find that doing things like that, it's like working out sometimes.
Okay.
For the brain. So some people are always active and moving, but then I still think you benefit by actually having the space to go on a run, go on a walk, work out, because that adds to your fitness, it gets your body moving. And I think that same thing applies for the mind too. where when you do certain things, it's not necessarily about it in the moment. Then you feel those effects later
as a rep that
as,
you get.
as a rep, yeah. And then you're like, oh, okay. When I get this bolt of lightning, it's like that's because I did that time, like I spent that time in the past.
So the meditation and or the walking, jogging, the exercising of the mental, do you count that as part of your working hours?
I don't like label it. I guess you could. Like if I was trying to be like hyperbolic and big about it, I'd be like, yeah, I mean, I'm working all the time. I'm always thinking about this. I'm always doing it. And if you're not, you're falling behind. Like I can do that, but I don't know. I mean, like it's a balance, right? Like it's a balance. I like it's like a lifestyle. I think that's the best way to put it.
It is a lifestyle.
Like being in a startup, I think, is a lifestyle where you have that, like you're always thinking about it. There's a part of your mind that's always aware. That's probably a better way to put it. You're always aware of what's going on, what needs to be done. Not necessarily actively thinking about it, contemplating it, ruminating about it. I think that fluctuates.
Yeah.
But you're always aware of where things stand, what might need to get done, and that I think is true. If that's what he means by you always have to be working, I think like that is true. It's like you should be aware of what's happening, especially in the early stages at all times.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's also, I think you only find that with like in big companies, you find the people that are super passionate about the thing that they're doing have that same mentality.
Yeah.
They're always super aware. They're, taking their work home with them, tying threads together, and it's because they're passionate about the thing, right? It's like, I'm super into whatever we're doing, and that helps.
Yeah.
You not get burnt out or like distracted.
Well, obsession is a powerful tool. And
yes, it is.
It's like the reason why I said that too is I was listening to Steve Nash and LeBron James talk about basketball. They're on this podcast. It's called Mind the Game.
Okay.
And LeBron was like, I have been successful for this long because I know how to use my mind. He said that's my defining factor. That's the difference. And that's really interesting to me because when I think about 6'8", 6'9" LeBron James, who's just a freight train coming through the lane, saying that his biggest strength is his mind, and then putting out a podcast where he's like, it's called Mind the Game.
Yeah.
That to me resonates. Like that's something that sticks out, and it's something that I think not enough people pay attention to. With how if he's doubling down on one skill, it's going to be that. It's like how to apply your mind to the game of basketball, and I think that that's also true for. I see that reflection more so in our space, where it is pure. It is the mind, and if he's somebody who's making sure that he's keeping his mind sharp and doing all of these things to perform at a high level, then that's something that should be taken note of. But going back to it, something that him and Steve Nash was like a 6'2" guard, white guard from Canada, played hockey and soccer growing up. Didn't start until he was in his teens, like 14, playing basketball. One thing is that he said that he was informed in basketball by what he learned in other sports, soccer and in hockey. He learned a trick where he would go behind, like in hockey, you go behind the net sometimes.
Yeah.
And like the Gretzky move, and he would like see the whole court, and it kind of disoriented people, gave him a different view. He applied that to basketball. You only get that from learning from other areas and applying it to
being open to the idea that, hey, I can learn something here that I can apply somewhere else.
Exactly. So I think that kind of speaks to the point that we were talking about earlier. But they were also talking about, LeBron was like, so obviously, like, you're in the body that you are. How did you get so good? He was like, Steve Nash was like, I was just obsessed with getting better about the little details and about making all of those details automatic. And so he gave more examples specific to basketball, but it speaks to the obsession point where I do think that sometimes people can like look down on that, but I think that there is a lot of value in controlled obsession.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Controlled obsession that's very interesting. Controlled obsession.
Yeah.
I think when you say obsession, people think, oh, it's uncontrolled.
Yeah. And sometimes, I think sometimes it is. A lot of times it is.
That's an addiction. That's stuff that's negative, but a controlled obsession.
Yeah.
That could be the title of this episode,
Controlled obsession. Yeah. It's like, it's obsession bad, it's obsession good. But no, that's something that, like, standards, and I think that's where it comes down to. It's like, you become obsessed about something and think in a good way, in a productive way, when you're holding yourself to a certain standard, and those standards can be different. I think when they're process oriented and take into account outcome, but like they're process oriented, they're smaller and measurable, then that's a more healthy way. If it's abstract and it's only result oriented, and that can lead to problems.
Do you have any good examples for a standard process versus results?
A standard process versus results.
Or maybe where do you look for to see like where your standards, the framework for that standard
is? Are we? So off the bat, and I could probably come up with a better example, but off the cuff, I'm thinking, are we hitting our mark? Like, are we doing what we are saying that we can do? That's one thing. And what I mean by that is, well, the reason why I say that is because it sounds obvious, but I don't think that it's, one, is easy to do, especially with life going on. And then two, I don't think it's, I think I see a lot of times where people let the little things go. And that's the difference, because people don't think it matters, but I think that's ultimately what sets the difference. If it's, sporting is just universal, that's kind of where I'm talking there, because I do want people that aren't necessarily in tech to,
it's a good analogy,
to see that. But it's like, oh, I think you're gonna like this little segue, but but the are you doing like the little reps? It's like, if you have 10 reps to do, are you doing all 10, or are you doing 8? If you lose count, are you gonna just round up and say, oh yeah, I did those, or are you gonna go do the extra one because you should have been keeping count?
Right.
Like, it's little things like that. And again, not everybody's perfect on day one, and so I think that there is like that fine line. No one ever is perfect, but I think it's one of those things to strive to. Like, you hear a lot of Olympic athletes. There's this long jumper, and she won a couple golds. I don't think she did this past Olympics, but she's won multiple golds. She was just clearly the best.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, I think there's a lot more left in the tank. Like, I think I could do a lot more. My technique's off here. I'm not like as precise in my steps and in my movements, etc. And so I'm like, that sounds like the mind of a champion, because she's always like, there's room to improve. I can tweak this. I can tweak this. And a lot of it is, how many things can I do? How many things can I do where I'm getting the result that I want? That's exactly it. How many things can I do where I'm getting the result that I want? And the more things that you can do, it's like, and the more things that you, and another thing is like, how can you have complete confidence in what you're going to, like the move that you're going to make? I can speak like for the things that I've gotten better at, I'm like, when I'm good at it, I know like I'm good at it. Like, I know I'm good at it. I'm not guessing.
Gotcha.
And I think that if you haven't had that experience in something, then you think that everybody's just out there guessing.
Yeah.
And like that you haven't gotten to the point where you figured it out, so it's hard to even imagine that. But to me, that's my standard, where it's like, okay, are we moving in that direction? Are we moving in that space and in that orientation? Because if we trick ourselves along the way, then that's not doing anybody any service. You're just cheating yourself.
In that scenario, I guess maybe tying it with like sports.
Yeah.
Do you think you have to have the standard mastered before you expect that of somebody else?
No.
Okay.
The reason why is because I think some coaches, not all coaches are great performers, but they know what the standard is.
So you'd be okay with a coach who's never played basketball? Stuff like that?
If I was like trying to be the best at basketball, then I'd probably, that's an extreme. I'd probably be
of
like,
course.
I would hope that you'd played some type of basketball, but I don't think that being the best basketball player is necessarily required for you to be an effective coach or teacher.
Yeah, I think it's definitely true. I think it definitely skews the way you look at the standards, though. I think you might be looking at other people and how they've achieved those standards, and if you've never had any experience in the field trying to get to that standard, you just think you can expect different things of people, and your expectations can be completely different from what actually happens. And I think that breeds a lot of like resentment and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to that aspect, since we were talking about Steph Curry earlier, that comes to mind is that Steph Curry is better than Steve Kerr ever was as a player.
Exactly.
But Steve Kerr played with Michael Jordan and won multiple championships. And so he has a very high standard of what success looks like.
Yep.
And so that's somebody that I think you can trust with. There's experience there. He's been around a lot of winning systems. I think he also played with the Spurs and Greg Popovich, which is another winning organization. But when that's somebody where it's like, okay, we can trust that person's perspective. Because when he's looking at something, he's like, we can't skip out on that. You might feel like that, we can't skip out on that. Or we need to take a break here because ultimately break, rest, and morale is better in the long term for execution of what we ultimately want to do.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting as we tie that into like a startup world where we don't necessarily, as a startup, you don't necessarily have the pedigree of like, I've been on these winning teams. Like, I guess speaking from like my experience, I've worked in a corporate world. I have, been on some winning teams, but it's not to that extent of like winning national championships, and playing for 30 plus years and then going into coaching.
Yeah,
it's a little bit of a different cycle there where it's like, okay, I have a pretty good grasp on what's happening here, and now I can hopefully go out and
translate it into
and then also get better and better, because I'm not just going to go out there, play my game and say like, okay, that's all I can do. I'm trying to get better and better. But it's just interesting, that dynamic where it's like we don't really have that history to fall back on and be like, oh yeah, like that decision, I know it's the right decision because I have this reference point.
Well, I think that one thing that we can take away, which we've learned actually, and I think it's important not to discount it, is in a shared experience that we had working at Rocket, is I think Rocket is one of the best in the country at marketing, because they're Rocket's selling a commodity. It's a mortgage, right? And it's that process, and they talk about it openly, and so they found ways to excel in other areas in the sales process and in the market. And I look at sales as a subset of marketing.
Right.
I don't think Rocket does nearly the volume of sales it does if it doesn't have the marketing levers that it's been pulling this whole time. And so that's one of those things where I'm like, okay, in the startup world, it's business still. And we have experience seeing how much attention they put on marketing, like in sales too, and then the pipeline throughout the whole process, they're checkpointing everything. And so it would be smart of us then, which I think we've started to understand the value of that as we've kind of learned, like the startup spaces. Oh, let's leverage that experience and not take for granted the
powerhouse that we were in.
Yeah, exactly. And say, okay, this is how they approach that problem. Whereas another startup might think of marketing as something that's just like a one-off thing, or it's something that, they don't have to pay as much attention to.
Right.
And so that's like, that kind of, I guess, brings it full circle too, where it's, okay, how do we start to continue to hold ourselves to a higher standard in the marketing space, just like we did in the tech space,
right?
And like we do in the tech space. But I do think that, like, to the initial point is, I think being able to draw on different experiences and say, okay, how can I apply that to this, makes a ton of a difference. Like, makes a world of a difference.
You have to have an open mind. Anytime you're in a new scenario, or even if a familiar scenario, be open-minded about how can this apply to other things. That's that metacognition that we always talk about, that self-awareness. That I think is also a huge multiplier in terms of your productivity. Because having that self-awareness, you start to question things that you probably before were just like, nope, that's my identity.
Exactly.
And it's like, all right, now time to break that. It's time to be a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit humble, and look at who the masters are in this field, and then try to get closer and closer and closer to their standards.
Exactly.
I think there is a little bit. Sorry, just I think quickly. There's just a little bit where it's like, without that experience, it's hard to know what the perfect standard would be for the given context.
Yeah.
Like if we had all of this resources or this knowledge, it's like, yeah, this is how I would do it. But given all these constraints, how can I use their standards effectively in my context?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's another thing too. Is it's a lot of it is about finding a lot of the hard work is about finding the right buttons to press and the right standards to have.
Yeah.
Because again, standards are measurables that you would measurables and patterns of execution that you're expecting in a given situation.
But if you apply the wrong ones, it can be disastrous.
Yeah, and it's
usually
usually multiple standards.
It has to be. You
for a
can't just
given,
look at one
for a given goal. Like
yes,
like somebody said, goals are expectations. That's somebody that I heard somebody say that earlier this week.
okay.
I would almost say that a goal is a collection of expectations. A good goal is a collection of expectations.
Oh, I agree with that.
Small measures that you can say, okay, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. If it's usually one expectation, then that's usually
Too
it's
much.
It's either encompassing way too much, or it's a really, really, really small goal.
That could be true. That could be true. Where it's like, I just need you to do this one small thing, and that's your whole goal. Cool. Now we're aligned. But if it's like, go, get me 5% more market share.
There's multiple expectations that I'm seeing. Like I'm looking along the way. But the jump off point that I wanted to jump into was the whole like you're only cheating yourself, because we talked about, you sent me that link yesterday about Cluey. And I thought that was an interesting link. It definitely gave me a couple different thoughts. But I'm curious about like what you were thinking of when you saw that.
So the backstory here is this student from Columbia University got, I guess, technically expelled from the university for allegedly cheating on, I think it was one of his interviews or some part of the university. He had some kind of interview and or maybe it was a test or something, and allegedly he cheated on it and got expelled. He now started his own company building a AI desktop app that will listen and help understand what's happening on your screen and then help you respond to it in a way that's completely undetectable. And the marketing there, which I think is cool, like you can go multiple different ways with that marketing. I have an assistant that's always going to be by you. It's going to learn about what you're doing. It's going to help you along the way. Like, that's one frame of mind that you can have with this kind of technology. The frame of mind that they chose to go with was an entire viral post on LinkedIn and some other platforms about how they are bringing forth an era of cheating. How everything in life can be cheated. And one of the advertisements that they spun up to do this was a guy and a girl on a date. The guy had his glasses on, and they were essentially like meta glasses, where he is able to pull up every single social interaction this girl has, her likes, her dislikes, her entire Instagram history. And as he's talking to her at this dinner, he's context switching to match her preferences. She'll say, oh, I really don't like Dr. Pepper. He goes, oh yeah, I hate Dr. Pepper. And then you'll see on the screen, like, his profile, it says likes Dr. Pepper, he deletes it. So he's context switching in the moment as cheating on the date. I think it's a really good way to go viral in terms of marketing. I'm not 100% sold that that's the way that your brand should be attached to. So that's kind of what my thoughts are on the whole context there. A lot of their messaging was the fact that, like, technology gets better and better over time. When Google came out, everyone thought, oh, why would you Google it? You're cheating. It's like, that's not really...
Don't use Wikipedia.
Exactly.
That's the area I'm from.
Exactly. It's like, that's not a trusted source. It's like, all right, well, it's, there's something there too. You can't just disregard somebody who has valid information. So yeah, it's just like an interesting spot where they're trying to position themselves in an area of technology where it's like, we're just going to advance the entire world into this area where they think it's cheating. It's really not. It's just technology advancing. So
I think that was a really good recap. Starting with the good, because it did make me think about it. It kind of fed into the whole idea of standards and got me
100%.
Because I think that I thought the quality of the video was really, really good. I think that the presentation of it was great. I loved that it was a story. I thought it was really, really well shot, and I thought it was an interesting way to get attention.
Exactly.
And that's something that I think signals great marketing. It's provocative, it gets the attention, etc. I don't know if I think that when you speak up about branding, though, branding is a story that people remember when they see you sign a symbol, a logo, hear your name,
Yep.
etc. And so I think there's the first aspect of it where you want to have people resonate with what
You're doing.
you're doing,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that's that person.
Like,
He does this.
Yeah, and have your attention. But then I think the second question that should go with that is it a story that you want them to remember? And I think we live in a time right now where more people are vying for the attention, and so just having their brand be recognized, but they're not thinking about the story that comes with that. Like personally, I wouldn't want to be known as the Hawk Tuah girl.
There's another one. That's a really good analogy,
Right.
actually.
And that was more accidental, right? Like that was in
Yeah.
an interview when she was probably drinking, and she found a way to capitalize off of that in certain ways. But I do think that the branding of it is something that a lot of people aren't necessarily mindful of. But I do think that it's a two-part thing, and I think that first part is part of what made me self-reflect and say, okay, that was really cool how they created a story and a campaign that got the attention of people.
Quickly, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing that I think I don't necessarily resonate with is the brand ultimately, though.
I think it's to me, when I took just a quick deep dive into this, and I think to me, what I kind of summarize it as is the viral moment to get people into your head is worth it in the age of the internet, because everything is fleeting. People forget about things so quickly that with a couple of new posts, you can rebrand your entire thing and say, oh yeah, we weren't doing that, now we're doing this.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where you can come in, hit a big blast and get everybody talking about you.
Yeah.
Because we're not the only place that's talking about this. Everybody online has, at least a couple minutes on this topic.
Yeah.
And then once you have established, hey, like I went viral, I have at least maybe some VCs that are funding me. Now let's switch up the messaging so that any new people that see us don't get that bad taste in their mouth that like we're a cheating company.
Well, they say marketing is for people that aren't your customers. So it's for net new people. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah, 100%. I think it's a symptom of like them thinking, yeah, the internet's just gonna forget that we did all this,
Yeah.
and then they're gonna move on because they're gonna rebrand and switch the topic.
Yeah.
But it definitely allowed them to break open onto stage and say, hey guys, we're here. This is what we're doing, and you can find us here.
Yeah. And so there's that. And agreed, right? But the thing that I'm, I guess, falling back to with it is, like, the thing that comes to mind when we talk about that is Kanye West right now, who is literally that to the extreme. And we don't have to get into any of like the messaging of the tweets, but I think anybody could go and Google that and say, wow, this guy, people now associate and say, oh, he's putting out a project or he's putting out an album.
Right.
And like that's what he's been able to do, and I think it can work to an effect. But I also think it damages. It's not in isolation. Like that's your identity now. Like that's the story that I remember. It's like you're the person that double speaks or will be outrageous to just for the attention.
Yep.
And again, like I think that there's different ways of approaching that. But I do think that there is a really cool takeaway in terms of like I liked that they put out something of the quality of the story. I will say that when I think of the actual branding of the story, and I saw that there might have been better ways to do it, where you're not necessarily using AI to lie to a girl,
Right.
and you're not compromising yourself and changing who you are to get a girl.
Right.
Where it was like, because first of all, I'll tell you that if that's what you're like, the reason why I didn't resonate is because I was like, that's not gonna get the girl, and it didn't get the girl in the story. And so it's like, if you're telling me that basically the way that I take away this from the story is that cheating will put you in a situation where you don't get what you want. And that's where I'm like, if you're not aligned with your actual values, then you risk being misinterpreted in a way where you can't defend yourself.
Yes.
And so that's a big thing with branding that I think I'm just coming to this right now. It's not something that I've actually thought about, but
I think a
thought
lot of
about
people
like this.
are going to rewind that clip.
What?
With what you just said.
With that branding part?
Yes.
Oh yeah, we can cut that up, put that out there, and create our brand.
Because that's
Right.
100% right. Like, people will associate those moments of how they felt with your long-term idea of like, oh, that's them.
Yeah, that's that. Because it's like in a fleeting world, it's like there's two things: either you're forgotten, or the thing that you do put out is the thing that I remember.
Yeah.
And then that's that.
Right.
So I don't know.
Very interesting.
It's a tricky thing because it's like I looked at it and I'm like, no, this. I mean, it did go viral, and like the first thing that I thought was, yeah, but I don't really agree with that. But then I wanted to pause and be like, no, but it went viral for a reason. It's actually better to be a learning moment.
Yes.
And say, okay, what are the things that?
Than to keep it at an arm's distance.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, like when I saw them drop that, I jumped right in. I looked at the website. Everything was about cheating.
Yeah.
They had a bunch of use cases on like, oh yeah, use us to cheat on your exams, to cheat on your relationships, to cheat on everything.
Yeah.
Literally this morning, I looked at the website, has nothing of that. It's absolutely none of that. All of it has is like, yeah, we're a desktop app. I can help you write a paper.
Yeah.
I can help you transcribe some notes.
Yeah.
It's like a totally different brand now
Yeah.
in the last 24 hours when they've just like, yeah, we need to like make sure this isn't going to slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
This is
And-
very interesting.
Yeah, and it's like the idea of it's cheating. It's cheating is it's because it does feel like a cheat code. AI does feel like a cheat code, and I think more people should
Use it.
Use it.
Yeah.
I think it was just the context of the video was just strange because I think like, but I mean, I don't know. It got our attention. We're talking about
I think
it.
it's viral for the fact that it was controversial too. Like, that was a big part of it.
Yeah.
If it wasn't controversial, it probably wouldn't have gone that viral. There's probably a lot of companies that are doing the similar thing. It would have kind of come down to like what their messaging was.
Yeah.
The fact that they took that path, that lane, I think plays a lot into the reason it went viral. I think also the fact that they have, like, to me, the video that they put together was to a high standard.
Yeah, that's
You know what I
something.
mean?
That's one of those things that, again, coming in, I was like, no, that's a good takeaway, and that's a standard that
It's a
I want
learning
us to get
moment.
to. It's like,
Yep.
I like that.
Yes.
I'd probably do the other parts different.
Exactly.
But I like that, and I like how it was like, yeah, it was like a story. It felt cinematic. It wasn't like they were speaking to us. You saw what he was trying to say, and I think that's really cool. But again, I think that the messaging behind it was provocative, but it's not always in the best way because I think about it and I'm like, I don't know if that's something that I stand for.
It's really weird because I think cheating itself has a stigma to it.
Yeah.
There's another analogy here where it's like, very successful billionaires
Yeah.
don't pay any taxes.
Yeah.
It's like, that's got a certain stigma to it,
Yeah.
but they're just following the rules of the tax code.
Yeah.
So it's
They're not really like cheating.
exactly
But
right.
They
It's
are,
like,
they do.
but they are cheating.
Yeah, but they have an unfair advantage.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I think there's another, because like so many people get very hot and bothered about that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, they're not cheating though.
But I think that also speaks to the ethos of the company too, though, and what we're doing.
Sure.
Because what we're doing is because for a long time, I mean, I've said this for a long time. I've thought that America was designed as a capitalist society.
Yep.
And
Amen.
Amen. And with that, it means that it values business. And so if you have a debt to society, which we have through our taxes,
Yep.
it is lowered when you engage in entrepreneurial activities.
Oh,
That's
100%.
functionally,
Yes.
that's how that is. And so
Yes.
when we look at Constance, plug, its ethos is for creating entrepreneurs because that's one of the best ways to take advantage of the country that we live in.
Yes, 100%. I think when you get down to like what's actually happening and the people who are in these businesses and who are successful understand this,
Yeah.
but the way that it affects your branding, if somebody tries to attack you
Yeah.
and say, oh, you're not paying taxes,
Yeah.
oh, you're not doing this,
Yeah.
it's like one of those things where it's like, oh, you're cheating,
Yeah.
and it has that certain stigma to it that I think is
Yeah.
extremely visceral.
Yeah.
And,
But I'll say
you know,
this,
yeah.
like I'll stand on business. Actually, right? I'll
Yeah.
stand on business if it push comes to shove. I don't
Yeah.
think that he's gonna stand on that whole situation if it's like, yeah, no, use our stuff to go in, like fabricate who you are so that way you can get the girl that you want. Like I
Right.
think
Or the job you want.
Right. I think he'd be like, oh no, it was just like marketing. It was just like BS. And so I'm like, that's where I'm like, okay, there might have been a better way to do that. Because I agree, I do think that it's like a cheat code. I do think that it's super powerful. I think people underestimate it, and I think people are scared of technology because it feels like cheating, but it doesn't mean like actually cheat on your stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Because you're only cheating yourself at the end of the day, and the only way to get better at anything in life is to hold yourself to the highest standard. Because otherwise, you just you're not improving.
you're selling yourself short.
Yeah,
really.
100%.
Like, and really, it's like you're the only person that is gonna feel that. So
Exactly.
it's like, don't even do it for.
But then,
me or
and if
us.
that happens, that's okay. Like, it's okay to do that. Just don't complain later when you don't have the things you want.
Yeah.
That's all, right? But no, I think this was a great conversation about standards, how they apply to like the real world and how we see them. Good analogies with sports, and then we brought in Cluely, which is like an exact example of how
current example.
Standards. So
cool, man.
This is great.
I very much like this episode. So like, comment, subscribe, holla at us. See you next week.
Peace.
Peace.